So let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about three things, quite big topics, but we'll try to get through it. The first thing being JSON, next APIs, and lastly something called fetch. So it actually says up here in my lesson plan, start letting the students investigating what JSON is, and then have someone try to explain that. Due to time, I will not be giving you that much time to investigate, so if someone prepared ahead of time and might be able to talk about JSON, that would be lovely. Otherwise, I'll be explaining and trying to assist you if you try. So anyone willing to take a jab at trying to explain what JSON is? You want? Can you try coming up here so the people who see the videos can listen to it? Or either that or speak very loud.
I just know it from my mind. I don't know.
No.
I will just speak from my mind. I know about this.
Okay, so you don't want to talk about it?
I don't know what you mean. No.
So try to explain for the rest of the class what JSON is.
Yeah. How I understand it is like a format where you save a lot of data as objects in some server or some provider, where you can call that information by special HTML request. And will you no?
I think you're starting to get a bit more into what we call an API, not just what JSON is.
No, okay. So what I know is just information, or like a tree of information set up as an objects that have a lot of information. You call it and you get the information and you read it.
Yeah.
In your browser.
Yeah. So as he was saying, JSON is a way of structuring objects in a way so we can move them between computers. Like if we have normal JavaScript objects, they work very, very fine on our own computer. But if we need to move them to another computer, or we need to save them for the next time the page is loading, as we have seen, our JavaScript code always restarts when the page loads. It doesn't stay there and being remembered. So one way, what we need to do is we need to do something called serialization, which is essentially taking some object in memory representation of numbers, strings, booleans, and turning them into one big string. And JSON is a way of doing this. JSON, the name says JavaScript object notation, so as implied by the name, it looks a lot like JavaScript objects. And for many intents and purposes, it is. Most of the time you could literally just copy-paste JSON into your code, assign it to a variable, and you would have a JavaScript object. There's I think like one case where that does not work. There's some number stuff. But for most cases it does, but usually we don't just paste it into our code, because normally if we need an object in JavaScript we just create it with normal JavaScript. So we need to get it from somewhere and then convert it back into a JavaScript object. But let's start by looking at some concrete JSON rather than just talking about it all hand wavery. Let's just go presentation mode. So the first thing first, if we have a file, normally ends in .json if it's JSON, we need to have either an object or an array as what we call the root. But if we just start with an object first, we just do this, just like normal JavaScript, we would do these curly brackets to signify an object. Then we would have keys like foo equal bar or something. The special thing about JSON is that for the keys we need to have quotes around them always. You cannot not have that, and we cannot have an object as the key, so we cannot do like this, if you will. So some object is some object. We cannot do that. The keys have to be either strings or numbers. Oh, they actually have to be strings. Some JavaScript allows you to not have quotes around it. This doesn't, apparently. And you can nest these things inside each other. So if we have like this, we can have. So here we have an object that has a foo key with a value of bar, and we have another key A that has an object as its value with a key of B that has a value of C. If we were to turn this into just JavaScript, we might do something like this. So this is just fine in JavaScript to do. And if you do it with a normal JavaScript, it looks like that. So as you can see, there's not much difference, except the quotes around the keys disappear. Yes.
Assign the key to array or not possible?
Yes, that's what I was going to talk about now. We have different types. Like we have string, we have objects, we also have number. So we can do like this, n42. We can do booleans, so true or false, if I want to. A thing to notice is just like JavaScript, I can have the same key in different objects. That's not a problem. They don't have to be unique, but I cannot on the same level have multiple like this. Additionally, I can have arrays.
You can also not, I mean, you gave an example of true and false for booleans, but you cannot also have B true, or let's say B string A and B again string B. You can't have that.
No, I can't have like this. Or what are you saying?
No, I'm saying like a duplicate keys.
Yeah, but
with different values on it.
Yeah, like this. That's not allowed.
That's not allowed.
Technically, most things will work, but which one would you expect to get out? The first one or the last one? A trick question. No one knows.
First one.
Yeah, but why not the last one? That's the last one being assigned.
Because like it's coming like from up to down.
Yeah, but if it's just reading and then every time it reads, assign it to the object, then it would be the last one. But you might also say, I have already seen this before, so I'm not using it again. And then it's your argument. So that's why I say don't do that. It's just wrong. You can have arrays, so you can do like this. My last name.
I have one more question before we move on. Just because we know it cannot be done doesn't necessarily mean that if you're requesting data from somewhere that you won't have these kind of mistakes. So there will be a way to sanitize them or
no. A bit depending on how you're passing the JSON. Some things will blow up. Just say we already got this. What the fuck is going on? And fail. Other things will fail silently and do like Invel just talked about, where it either uses the first one or the last one. So it's a bit, there's no clear result. You have to look at what your implementation does concretely. But usually if you see something like that, the API is usually broken very badly. We had a problem at work where back when people implemented our API many years ago, they wrote all this out by hand. Which means, for example, they got 2 keys sometimes, or other cases they did like this, so they forgot one of the quotes, or even better, like this, where they had extra. Too much is also not good. Another thing to notice here is that you have a comma after each value, except if it's the last one. And that goes both for objects and arrays. So as I mentioned, you could also have arrays around the whole thing. So you could do this. Just important to notice that you should have either an array or an object as the root. You cannot do like this. That's not allowed. So any other questions to JSON so far? It's a relatively simple format, and that's what's really, really nice about it. But once people start working with it, it can get a bit more confusing, I've noticed. So what does it tell to other talk about here? Oh yes, we could also technically have null. It's also a valid value in JSON. Don't do that. Unless you have a really good reason, because that's a good way of crashing other systems, because they don't expect things to be null suddenly. So then they go boom. What we can do with our JSON, if we don't have something like WebStorm or VS Code that automatically validates the JSON, say that I had an extra comma here, like my IDE will complain and say this is not allowed. But if you don't have that, if you just have a good old notepad and you're like, is this correct? Is it not? Well, then you can always copy paste it into something like JSON-lint and then see validate, and they will say like, meh, this is not right. The error message could be better. I will be the first one to say that, but we'll at least tell you roughly what line something went wrong on. And in this case, remove the comma and say validate, and says, check, everything is now validated. Yes, and also we need to have double quotes, not single quotes, so we can't do like this. That's not allowed. It has to be double quotes.
But you can assign to empty string.
Yeah, empty string is fine, as long as it has two quotes, as long as it's double quotes. This, not allowed. But this is fine. So very, very, very tiny difference, but very important to notice. You're also not allowed to use template literals, which are these ones. And yeah, next part would be, then now we have this fancy JSON. How do we deal with that in JavaScript? So if we open our project view here and create a new JavaScript file, we want to, first things first, we need to have the JavaScript, the JSON somewhere. So if we do this, boom, we have a JSON string in a string. And if we just lock this out and do X, then you can see here we get that as a string. So JavaScript right now JSON it's just a string. We cannot use it as an object. So like if we try to say we have on the root we have something called foo.
Just 1 second. You copy the JSON to the JavaScript, but I can see that you put backticks on it.
Yeah. These backticks that allows me to have line breaks. You have 3 ways of having strings in JavaScript. So you have this one is like something like this. You can do it with double quotes,
yeah.
And you can do it with template strings,
yeah.
Which these has the benefit that they allow you to have multiple lines, but you can also do what is called string interpolation. So you can do.
Yeah, that one I've used before.
Yeah.
So the only reason you put the backticks on the JSON is just to have multiple lines.
Yes, and also because that makes it easier to put quotes in. Like if I have double quotes already, then I need to escape them whenever I put them in, and it's just easier to do it the other way. Later on we'll learn how to load this file, so we don't need to put it directly in, but right now we're just focusing on the JSON part specifically.
Vi gør opmærksom på, at der på anden sal, nærmere betegnet scenen, foregår højtlæsning for børn om rensdyret Rikke. Og jeg gentager, rensdyret Rikke. Ved bogen, der bliver læst højt af for børn, det er på
No, she's saying that on a second floor there's they're reading aloud for kids right now.
Afholder Odense Renovation en workshop, hvor man
they are reading some kids adventure for kids.
Sin egen sorteringsplads.
Shut up, woman!
Og det varer indtil kl. 18, hvor alle ligeledes er velkomne.
For a second there, I thought
Thank
someone
you.
was flushing the toilet.
Yeah.
No, that's like this. What happened? Did I was like, what happened to my computer? What's it doing? It's not. And I was like, oh, right. The speakers.
It did sound like someone was with the microphone. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So back to this. Because this is a string, we can't access, for example, like we can see foo up. Let's get away with the outer array right now. We cannot access foo on that, even though there's an object right here. So if we just do this, then we'll get a whole lot of undefined, nothing. Rather than, well, the value of foo. Like if this has been an object, if we do this. Then we can access foo just fine. So, but because this is still a string, it has not been converted into a JavaScript object yet. To do that, we do JSON.parse. That takes your JSON string and it returns some value. And on this, if we just log them out, as you can see up here, we just get a string, completely old string. Down here, we actually get a JavaScript object out, and we can access things on it, like foo. Viola, magic. We can also go the other way. So let's create a reverse JSON string. That is JSON.stringify, very original name. And then if we log that out, as you can see, we get just a normal string down here. But did you notice one thing? It's formatted up here. It's not down here. Like, it's just one long line of text, which is really difficult to read. If we want to do something about that, we have some additional arguments here we can say. So we could do the replacer, is a whole special thing that you very rarely need. And then we can say, like, how much space should it put when it's indenting things. And in this case, I want 2 spaces. So then I get a nicely formatted JavaScript string out. Much the same like we had up here. So that's how to parse it. I think we have went through some of that. So
just before we go further, just like what you did here, just like you access it first with parse to access as an object, and then you trying to change the JSON to string.
A JSON is a string. JSON is a way of formatting a string so we can turn it into an object, but we don't have to.
Okay, so the string 5, what's it for?
That turns an object into a string, whereas parse turns a string into an object. The important things about these strings is that they have to be JSON for them to work. They have to be formatted like JSON, like this. If not, like if I had forgotten a comma here, it'll just get mad at me and say like, this JSON is wrong, without a very good error message.
So this string 5, you just like take the value, which is already object, and turn it back to string.
Yep, I could also create a new one. So like my value and say it has a name, which is Rasmus, and has like programming.
This object.
So this let's just turn into normal object. So this is a completely normal object. You have seen those 100 times before by now. If I turn these into a JSON, you'll see like we get this out. So it's a way of turning an object into a string that's very easy to send around to other places. For example, over the network. We cannot send our objects over the network normally because they're represented in some way that's specific to your PC. It would not, for example, work on Ricardo's Mac. They might work between our PCs because they have the same processor most likely. But because they're slightly different, it might still not work. It might just be because I have a newer version of Windows, the memory might be organized slightly different or something.
So this string is just like the way how I change the object to string, and then send it through the internet, and then I read it by JSON again.
Yeah.
That would be.
Yeah, that's usually how you would do it. So when you're sending it, it would be a string. When you're working with it, it would be an object.
Okay.
And that allows us to talk between systems, because one thing is, if my server was also talking JavaScript, it might be able to handle just directly memory. But if it's written in Java or C# or something else entirely, they don't represent memory the same way. So then it might not work. Like, for example, some languages, they don't store the key as part of the object in memory, because they work in a way they don't need the key when they're running. So they just store all the values like an array directly in memory, and then they know when you access this key, they know that it needs to be the fourth value or something. So we can't. That's the benefit of JSON, is that it allows us to agree on a way of talking about these objects that we all understand. Whereas like this up here, yeah, sure, it looks nice for humans, but I am 99% sure that's not how Chrome represents it in memory, because remember, RAM is just one long continuous string of ones and zeros. But if that continuous string is slightly different, it'll probably not work. Or it'll have a different value or something. So we agree on how we should put those ones and zeros, and then we can send them somewhere else. Or we can receive them, for that matter. I think, yes. So the first exercise, or code inspiration here, if you really will, is try to do this. So imagine you're running a meal ordering site. Orders come in from the web, and we need to store them in a JSON file somewhere. Ignore how they come in. The important part here is we need to store things in a JSON file. So create a JSON file with 2 orders that contains at least these things: an order name, an order ID, a price, a list of drinks, and any extras to the order. And think about what type of the data should be saved as. So for example, should it be a string, a number, a boolean? Should it be an object or an array? Consider these things when you do it. So I don't think you'll need more than like 15 minutes for this, and then we'll try to look at it.